Hello and welcome to another sew along video. Today we're going to be making Emma trousers. You can see it here. This is a hard trouser and it works the best with the jeans fabric. So today I will show you how to make jeans. I know sewing jeans could be intimidating a lot of times, but I promise you it's not that hard. All you need is some patience to make flat fill seams or and a hammer. We're going to use a hammer here and you will see where and how, and it's going to be super excited. So stay with me and let's get started.
Alright, let's get started. First you will need the pattern. I already cut it out of this really nice dark denim. You will also need the instructions and a top stitching thread. I chose this contrasting thread. You will also need top stitching or jeans needles. They are much thicker and they will help you with the top stitching thread. I chose this nice metal zipper and the button for the jeans. Here I'm just trying to get my camera to focus on the button. And the last tool you will need is just a regular hammer to pound down the thick seams. We will start with a little coin pocket, which is an optional but very nice addition to the jeans. Press the top of the coin pocket twice at 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeter and top stitch. Now press the side seam allowances to the wrong side at 5/8 of the inch or 1.5 centimeter. The coin pocket is generally sewn on the right side of the garment. However, if you are left-handed, you can sew the coin pocket on the left side of the garment. This pattern is designed to have the coin pocket on the right side, thus grab the right side of the front pocket facing and place it right side up. Then place the coin pocket on top of it, matching the notch marked on the pattern. Pin it and top stitch 2 rows on the sides. For the first row, top stitch close to the edge of the front pocket facing at around 1/8 of the inch or 0.3 centimeters. Stitch the second row at 1/4 of an inch or 0.7 centimeter from the first row. Now grab both pocket facings and serge the curved edge of the pocket facing. To attach the pocket facing on the pocket bag, you need to place the pocket facing on top of the front pocket bag on the right side. This means that the wrong side of the pocket facing will face the right side of the pocket bag. Stitch all around to secure the pocket facing in place. And just like this, the pocket bag is ready. Now we will attach it to the front pant. Grab the front pant pattern piece and place the pocket bag right sides together with the front pant, aligning the pocket opening. Pin it in place, baste if necessary or not, and stitch at 3/8 of the inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Press the seam flat. Now fold over the pocket bag to the wrong side of the front pant and press carefully. As you can see in the video, I'm really taking my time and trying to slightly overlay the front pant fabric to the inside so the pocket bag would not be visible on the outside. Now top stitch the opening of the pocket. I like to use 2 rows of top stitching. For the first row, top stitch close to the edge from the right side of the front pant at around 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters. I like to use edge stitching foot for this. For the second row, stitch at around 1/4 of the inch or 7 millimeters from the first row. For this one, I like to use quilter's 1/4 inch foot. Now look at this top stitching, I did it on the both sides. And now we are ready to move on to close the pocket bag. You can simply align the pocket bag, sew it and serge the raw edges, but I recommend to finish the pocket seams with a French seam for this particular pattern. For the French seam, fold the pocket bag in the middle, wrong sides together and align the side seams. Pin and stitch on the machine at around 3/8 of the inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Trim the seam allowances to around 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters and fold the right sides of the pocket together. Carefully press the seam to ensure it's flat, and don't forget to push out that corner. Pin and stitch at around 1/4 of an inch or half centimeter from the edge. And we're almost done with the pocket. You just need to machine baste the top and the sides of the pocket so it would not move around while you sew the rest of the trouser. And now we're ready to attach the front yoke. Grab the front yoke. Also grab the front yoke pattern piece and make sure you check where is the side seam and where is the center front seam. Here we'll use a flat felt seam, which is a very durable seam often used in jeans. To do the flat felt seam, you need to place the front yoke and the front pant wrong sides together. I know it might sound counterintuitive, but trust the process. Align the notches, side seam, center back, and pin the yoke in place. Stitch at the machine at 5/8 of the inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. It's very important to keep the seam allowance, otherwise you will not be able to fold the seams on top of each other. Now trim the front pant seam allowance to 1/4 inch or 7 millimeters. It's very important that you trim the front pant seam allowance rather than the yoke seam allowance. Now, I always say that this part is optional, but I highly recommend, otherwise it will be really difficult for you to do flat fill seam. So there are certain points in the jeans that become really bulky, especially where you have top stitching and seams meeting each other. In this case, the pocket seam becomes really bulky because you need to fold it over. For this reason, I highly recommend to hammer it down. You just need a regular hammer, nothing special. Pound it a couple times and then fold it over as I show here in the video. I usually like to hand baste flat fill seams in place. That will ensure that you don't have any puckering and the seam is more even. However, you can see whatever method or technique is better for you. You can pin it or you can just fold it and go straight to the sewing machine. Once you have that seam secured, fold it over the front pant seam and top stitch it in place. Here I recommend you to use edge stitching foot. It usually comes with your sewing machine and it helps to achieve really good results. Repeat the same on the other leg and you're done. Your yokes are finished. We will move on to probably the most difficult part in constructing the jeans is to install the zipper. Grab your fly shield and fly facing and make sure you apply interfacing on both of them. First, finish the rounded edge of the fly facing with serger or any other preferred seam finishing method. Then, with right sides together, sew the bottom seam of the fly shield at 3/8 of inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Clip the corner of the fly shield and turn it right side out, making sure to push out the corner. Press it in place and serge the long edge of the shield. Now grab both of the front pant pattern pieces and finish the raw edges of the rise and crotch curves with a serger or any other preferred seam finishing method. Now in this design, the zipper is designed to be on the left side of the trousers as you are wearing them. However, you can choose to change it to the right side. It all depends on your preference. There are no strict rules. Having said that, place the fly facing along the crotch edge on the left front pant, right sides together. Stitch at 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Fold the facing under to the wrong side of the front pant and press over the edge to flatten the seam. Continue pressing the crotch seam allowance to the wrong side at 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter from the edge. Now this is a very important step. Grab your pattern piece and make sure that the front crotch notch is marked on your pants. This notch indicates where you need to stop top stitching. So starting from this notch, top stitch the facing close to the edge, approximately 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters. Edge stitching foot here is again very useful, and I recommend to use it. The next step is to lay the fabric right side up and open the fly facing. Flip the zipper and place it facing down, as you can see in the video. Make sure to align inner zipper tape with the crotch edge. The zipper stop should be positioned on the black circle marked on the fly facing pattern piece. Then sew a straight stitch along the edge of the zipper tape closest to the edge of the fly facing with a regular zipper foot. Make sure to place the zipper teeth 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter from the top of the waist seam. Now at this step you will need a zipper top stitching template. Fold the fly facing under to the wrong side of the front pant, and using zipper top stitching template, mark the outer top stitching line. The curve should end at least 3/8 of the inch or 1 centimeter below the zipper stop, so that there is enough room for the presser foot when top stitching. Flip the front leg wrong side up, lift and fold the end of the outer zipper tape, as you can see in the video, so that the top stitching doesn't catch it. Attach the fold with a few hand basting stitches. Make sure the fly facing is folded under so you will catch it while top stitching. And just like that, you're ready to top stitch the fly front. Starting at the top edge, sew the outer row first until you reach the lower edge. When you reach the edge, with the needle in the fabric, lift the presser foot and pivot the front pant at 90 degrees. Sew along the edge for around 1/4 inch or 7 millimeters, which is around 2 or 3 stitches. Then pivot again and sew the inner row of the top stitching. The second row should be around 1/4 inch or 7 millimeters away from the first row. The entire fly top stitching should be done in one construction seam. This is probably the most difficult top stitching part of the jeans, and it requires a lot of precision. That's why try to be as slow as possible, even hand crank your machine if you feel it's necessary. Pin the fly facing away, exposing the edge of the zipper that is not stitched on. Place the fly shield over the zipper tape that is exposed. The fly shield should be covering the bottom of the zipper. Pin or hand baste the fly shield in place, and starting from the bottom, stitch along the zipper tape. Use the regular zipper foot. Keep the fly shield still pinned away, because now we need to attach the right side of the pant. First, fold under the seam allowance of the crotch of the right front pant at 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter and carefully press it. Place a folded front pant edge on the zipper, leaving around 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters of space between the fabric edge and the zipper coils. Carefully pin it in place, but before ensure that the front yokes are aligned. Here I am unpinning the fly shield to really check that the top stitching lines are aligned. Once you ensure that the top stitching is aligned, take everything to the sewing machine and using regular zipper foot, stitch the front pant in place. The final step is to sew the front crotch. At this stage, the seam allowances of left and right front leg crotch should be pressed under to the wrong side. Place the left front leg crotch, the one with the fly shield, on the right and align the edges of the seam allowances. At this stage, I recommend to hand baste the front crotch in place because the seams are curved and it would be really hard to keep them aligned without hand basting. Starting from the raw edge, top stitch the first row at around 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters and continue sewing until the stitching overlaps with the fly top stitching. Stop at the top stitch of the fly top stitching. With the needle in the fabric, lift the presser foot and turn the fabric 90 degrees, then sew approximately 1/4 of an inch 7 millimeters, which is around 2 to 3 stitches. Turn the fabric again and stitch the inner row approximately at 1/4 of an inch or 7 millimeters away from the first row. To ensure even stitching, use a presser foot toe as a guide. The top stitching on the crotch should be one continuous seam. Now you need to attach the fly shield to the front pant. To do that, you need to sew the bar tacks. This is necessary to secure that the zipper is stable and it doesn't break while you're putting the pants on and off. To sew the bar tacks, you need to use narrow zigzag stitches with a short stitching width over the zipper top stitching. There's no clear rule where the bar tacking should be, but it should be around the curve of the top stitching. Now that we are done with the front pant, we will move to the back. As a first step, we will need to prepare the back pockets. Using serger or any other preferred seam finishing method, finish the top edge of the back pocket. There are 2 rows of notches marked on the back pocket pattern. The first row indicates the fold line of the pocket's top edge. Fold the pocket's top edge to the wrong side at the indicated notches and carefully press. Now fold the top edge to the right side of the pocket at the pressed fold line and pin it in place. Stitch the folded edges at 5/8 of inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowances. Clip the corners, but make sure you don't clip through the stitching, and turn the pockets right side out, pushing out the corners. Carefully press the pocket. Also press the side seams at 5/8 of the inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Top stitch 2 rows of stitches on the right side of the back pocket. The top row should be sewn at the indicated notches. The second row should be at 1/4 inch or 7 millimeters lower than the first row. And just like that, your back pockets are done. To find the right placement of the back pocket, grab the back pant pattern piece and follow the indicated back pocket pattern markings. I like to cut it out and simply using the chalk mark it on my fabric. Place the back pocket on the markings and pin it in place. I suggest to use as little pins as it is possible, otherwise you will have a lot of puckering and it will be difficult to get a very nice and neat top stitching. To top stitch the back pocket in place, start with the outer row. Here I really recommend to use edge stitching foot, which is usually included in your sewing machine, to ensure that your stitching is really straight. Carefully pivot at the corners and do not backstitch at the end. To secure the seams using the needle, simply thread the long tails of the thread to the back side and make a knot. For the second row, I do recommend to use a 1/4 inch foot, which is also called quilter's foot. It will help you again to keep the straight stitch. Make sure the second row is stitched at 1/4 inch or 7 millimeters away from the first row. You will need to make bar tacks with the sewing machine to secure the corners of the pocket. To make the bar tacks, sew a narrow zigzag stitch with a shorter stitch length, either horizontally or diagonally. Now when the back pockets are done, we will attach the back yoke. Here we will use again the flat felt seam. To do the flat fill seam, you need to place the back yoke and the back pant wrong sides together, align the notch, side seam, and center back seam. Pin the yoke in place and stitch at 5/8 of inch or 1.5 centimeter from the edge. Make sure to keep this seam allowance width, otherwise you will not be able to fold the seam over. Carefully trim the back pant seam allowance to 1/4 or 7 millimeters. Fold the yoke seam allowance over the back pant seam allowance and hand baste it in place. I really recommend to hand baste the flat felt seams in place because it's really difficult to keep them straight while sewing. Once you've done that, top stitch on the right side of the pant following the folded edge of the seam. Repeat the same on the other yoke, and then you're done with attaching the yokes to the back. We will also be using flat fill seam to attach the back crotch seam. To do that, place both pant patterns pieces wrong sides together, aligning the notches. Stitch at 5/8 of the inch or 1.5 centimeter from the edge. It's very important to keep the seam allowance width here as well to ensure that you would be able to fold the seam over. Trim one of the seam allowances down to 1/4 inch or 7 millimeters. In this case, unlike with the yokes, it doesn't matter which seam allowance you decide to trim down. Now, this step is optional, but I highly recommend to use your favorite sewing tool, which is a hammer. You will need to hammer down the area where the yokes meet. This area is usually really bulky and I find it really difficult to do flat fill seam here without hammering it down. Fold the wider seam allowance, the one that you did not trim, over the trimmed seam allowance and hand baste it in place. While hand basting, check whether the seams where the two yokes meet are flat enough. In my case, I needed to hammer them down because they were still quite thick. Once you've done that, top stitch at the edge of the folded seam allowance. Here again, I recommend to use edge stitching foot. And now you're done with the back of the pant. Double check how it turned out and whether the seams are really nicely aligned, and we're ready to move to the next step. Now we're going to do the last flat fill seam, but that's the longest flat fill seam in the entire project. Place the front and the back pants wrong sides together and align the crotch seam. Pin it in place and stitch at 5/8 of inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Again, keep the seam allowance, otherwise you will not be able to fold the seam over. Carefully trim one of the seam allowances down to 1/4 inch or 7 millimeters. Here again, it doesn't really matter which side of the seam you decide to trim down. The place where the crotch seams meet is bulky again because of flat felt seams. Therefore, I suggest again to use hammer and to hammer it down. Fold the wider seam allowance, the one that you didn't trim, over the trimmed seam allowance and hand baste it in place. This is a very long seam, so you will definitely have a backache after you finish hand basting it. Before going to sewing machine, double check whether you can fold the crotch area over. In my case, you can see the crotch area was still too bulky and I needed to hammer it further. Once ready, take everything to the sewing machine and top stitch following the edge of the folded seam allowance. Here too, I was using edge stitching foot. Check your flat filled seam and whether the crotch seams are aligned. The next step is to finish the side seams. To begin with, use a serger or any other preferred seam finishing method to finish the side seams of front and back trousers. Fold the trousers right side together and pin the side seams. Take your time to pin the side seams where the yokes meet to ensure that these upstitching seams are aligned. I usually start by aligning the yokes and then the hem to ensure that the side seams are equally distributed. Sew the side seams at 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Here you don't need top stitching thread, you can use a regular matching thread. Here's a good time to try the jeans on and to see whether it fits on your waist. You can either take in or loosen up the waist depending on the fit and your preference. When you're happy with your fit, carefully press the seam allowances open. Now you need to reinforce the pocket. To do that, you need to top stitch one line from the top of the side seam to the bottom of the pocket on the back leg side of the seam. Now we will move to prepare your waist loops. To do so, use a serger or any other seam finishing method to finish one edge of the belt loop. Fold the strip into 3 parts and casting the raw edge with the finished edge on the top. Carefully press. Top stitch 2 rows across all layers at around 1/8 inch or 3 mm from the edge. Cut the strip into 5 equal pieces of 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. Following the markings on the yoke pattern pieces, place the loops on the waistline right sides together. Sew the loops to the upper edge of the trousers at indicated notches and in the center back as shown in the video. Now we move to the waistband. The Emma pattern includes straight and curved waistbands. The choice between the type of the waistband really depends on your personal preference. First, make sure you interface both of the waistband pieces. Then, place the both waistbands right sides together and stitch on the long edge at 3/8 of the inch or 1 cm seam allowance. For the curved waistband, stitch the shorter curve. Carefully press the seam allowances open. Then, fold and press one of the long edges of the waistband to the wrong side at slightly less than 3/8 of an inch or 1 cm. At this stage, it doesn't matter which long side you choose to press under. Now grab your jeans and pin the waistband that is not pressed to the top edge of the pants, sandwiching the belt loops right sides together. It's important to keep the edges of the waistband extended by 3/8 of an inch or 1 cm past the center front on both sides. Sew with 3/8 of an inch or 1 cm seam allowance all around the waistband. Press the waistband seam allowances towards the waistband. Then, fold in and press the short edge of the waistband seam allowances to the wrong side of the waistband. This method creates a very crisp corner. The waistband will be enclosed just with top stitching rather than sewing together at the ends of the waistband. Fold the waistband to the wrong side of the trousers. In preparation for top stitching, ensure that all pressed seam allowances are facing inwards. I really advise that the waistband is hand-based in place for added stability. Top stitch around the waistband. Because the ends of the waistband are quite bulky, I do recommend to start from the middle of the waistband. If you have one, use edge stitching foot because that will help you to keep the straight line perfectly aligned to the edge of the seam. Slow down at the corners and at the edge of the waistband to ensure the best possible look. My top 1 advice in top stitching the waistband is to take your time and to be really slow. I know this video looks really fast, but it's really accelerated. Now we come back to the loops. Measure 3/8 of an inch or 1 cm down the loops from the waistline. Secure the loops with a regular stitch. Repeat the same on all 5 loops. If needed, because it's quite bulky, use a cardboard behind your foot to lift it and to level it up. Now grab the upper edge of the loop and fold it under by 3/8 of an inch or 1 cm. Carefully press the loops and stitch them in place using bar tacking technique. If the fabric is thick, you might need to use a hammer or cardboard to lift the presser foot up. Repeat the same on all 5 loops. Now sew a buttonhole on the left front pant. The loop should start at around 3/8 of an inch or 1 cm from the waistband edge. Make sure you position the buttonhole in the middle of the waistband. Carefully cut open the buttonhole. With the zipper closed, mark the button placement through the buttonhole. I like to use a pin to make sure the exact placement. Since I'm using denim button, I will pierce the hole through the fabric and push the nail through the hole. Place a button on the top. I'm using here the presser, but you can also hammer the button in place. And like that, your waistband is done. We just have one last step before the jeans are finished. You will need to finish the hem. I have already pressed the hem twice to the wrong side at 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeter. Here I will use a hammer again because the flat fill seam folded twice can get really bulky. However, it's not necessary and it all depends on how thick is your fabric. Go to the sewing machine and on the right side of the fabric, edge stitch the hem in place. Carefully go over the bulky part of the hem. If needed, use cardboard to level up your foot. And you're done! Here you can see the final look. The jeans should be fitted on the waist and hip and quite loose on the leg. It's a perfect pair of mother jeans with an interesting front yoke detail. Thank you for joining me and enjoy your jeans!